I'm Miss Wade from Georgetown K-8, and I teach 7th grade. Today we are going to be learning about African governments. My expectations for this lesson, I need you to be able to complete work independently, take notes during the lesson, and be ready to use what you learned. Materials for this lesson, you will need 3 sheets of paper and a pen or pencil. Honestly, anything to write with works for me, as long as you can read it. All right, standards and goals. Today's standard that we are looking at is compare and contrast the different forms of citizen participation in government. We're specifically looking at the participation in autocratic and democratic governments, and we are going to be looking at the countries of South Africa, Nigeria, and Kenya. My goal is by the end of the lesson, you are going to be able to talk about the 6 main types of government and how citizens participate in South Africa, Nigeria, and Kenya. All right, so right here, we are going to need your very first piece of paper. You are going to take it. You are going to fold your paper in half, hot dog style, for those of you that like that terminology. And then you're going to do a third and a third. When you open it up, you are going to have 6 boxes. If that is too complicated, that's okay. Not everybody likes folding paper. Just make 6 boxes. In those 6 boxes, I'm going to have you label the types of government that we are going to review. There are going to be oligarchy, autocratic, democracy, federation, confederation, and unitary. All right. Do not panic if I start to move on. If you need to pause, that's fine. You can pause the screen here and fill in your information. All right, so the ones that we are going to start with are oligarchy and autocratic governments. An oligarchy means it is ruled by a few. That means just a few people are in charge at the top, just a couple. A really good example of this is in South Africa during the period known as apartheid. Only those that were of white European descent had the ability to govern. It took several years to make those changes, and now everyone has a voice. On this slide, what you are taking from it, I would like you to write the definition, the example, and your version of the illustration. Autocratic is our next topic that we are going to learn about. It is a country or type of government that uses one ruler with unlimited power. They can do whatever they want. There are 2 main types of this. One is a monarchy, and that's headed by a king or a queen. The way those people come to power is very simple. They are born to it. Their family has been kings or queens of that country for thousands and thousands of years. So when they are born, they fall into line to become the next king or queen. The other form of that is a dictatorship. Well, a dictatorship comes a little differently. It usually comes one of 2 ways, but the most important part is it comes by force. A dictatorship is something where someone usually has a military coup and forcefully takes over the government, or say they were elected president, they usually use military might to hold their standing. So they declare themselves president for life, which is very similar to what happened in Cuba. All right, democracy. It means led by the people. It is a country or a nation that receives its power from the people, and they give the people an opportunity to vote and are involved in the decision making. 2 modern examples of this are Kenya and South Africa. I would enjoy you drawing the illustration. If you notice that several people, and the arrow up says ran by the people. The people have a voice. My favorite part of this definition is it says opportunity to vote. That means people have the ability to do that. The other thing we need to understand about democracy is we don't typically make people vote. So those are part of those citizen responsibilities that we're going to get into later. The other thing that I need you to notate is that there are 2 types of democracy. There's presidential and there's parliamentary. The main difference between these 2 is who is leading them. In a presidential democracy, the executive branch leads them. That is usually led by the president. In a parliamentary democracy, the legislative branch leads them, and that's usually led by, say, a prime minister or the head of the House or the head of the Senate, depending on which country you're looking at. Finally, we are going to look on this slide at federation. This is a type of government where power is divided between a central and regional or state governments. They usually have a written constitution that says who says what's going to be in charge. It says who's going to be in control of which part. A very good example of that is the U.S., and another example is Nigeria. Something that you need to think about. As U.S. citizens, we tend to have a federal government, but we also have a state government. When any decisions are made, the federal government gets to make choices for us that overrule any state decisions made. All right, Confederation. All right, Confederation is voluntary by nature. It usually has a weak central government, and it has all the power is held by the states, which is kind of interesting. A modern example of this is the European Union, because the countries of Europe agreed to come together and form a union with a common language and a common currency and common laws. A historical example of this would be the United States. Our very first Constitution was called the Articles of the Confederation, and it would have worked out much better, except for the fact with the weak central government, its only real weakness is that people cannot, its only real weakness is that states have all the power, so when the central government makes a law, they don't have the ability to reinforce it. All right, our final government that we are going to review is unitary. One central authority controls absolutely everything. Power is not shared between the states, counties, or provinces. A modern example of this would be Morocco. A unitary government, one person makes all the decisions, the government tells everybody else what to do, and that's all of it. All right, so hopefully you have written down all of your definitions. Remember, it is not a problem to pause the video and write down the definitions that you did not get. All right, we are going to step number 2, African government notes. You will need your second piece of paper, and if you will please pause and draw out the chart. It will have 4 boxes across and 7 boxes going down. Please feel free to pause. We are going to answer each of these questions for Kenya, South Africa, and Nigeria. And the questions that we are going to be looking at is type of government, who is their leader, what is the role of the leader, how do citizens participate, how the leader is chosen, and types of legislature. Okay, the first one we're going to start with is Kenya. What type of government do they have? They have a presidential democracy, which is led by the president. He has a large amount of political power and does not share that with anybody else. He is the chief executive of state, and he attends all the ceremonies and meets with all the world leaders as the head of state. The people directly elect the president. He serves a 5-year term and is only eligible to serve 2 5-year terms. How do citizens participate? Anybody that is 18 years and up may vote, but they're not required to by law. That's part of that democratic ideal, is they have the ability, they have to make the choice to vote. Even though the citizens vote for the president as well as members of the parliament, they do not have much say in government, sadly. Corruption has been a major problem for the last couple of years, and because of African culture sometimes views politics as a male-dominated area women are not always represented equally. Moving down, how is the leader chosen? The citizens directly elect them. We just talked about that one. And the final thing, what type of legislature do they have? They have a bicameral legislature, which consists of 2 houses, a Senate and the National Assembly. The people are directly responsible for electing the members of both houses in Kenya. All right. South Africa. What type of government do they have? They have a presidential democracy, but it has parliamentary tendencies. What type of leader do they have? They have a president. The president is the chief executive and holds a lot of political power. People have to be 18 years old to vote. Personal freedoms are numerous after apartheid was removed, and their rights are protected under the new laws. Citizens directly elect the members of parliament, but they do not directly elect the president. The people that they vote for in parliament get to choose who will be their president. It is chosen by who is the leader of the majority within their parliament. How is the leader? Finally, what kind of legislature do they have? They have a bicameral legislature as well. It consists of the National Assembly and the National Council of Provinces. All right. Please pause here if you have not completed taking the notes on South Africa and add them into your graphic organizer. All right. Our final country is going to be Nigeria. It is also a presidential democracy. However, the president acts both as chief of state and head executive. He is directly elected by popular vote. The legislature is a bicameral legislature, and it's called the National Assembly. It consists of a Senate and a House of Representatives. Members of the houses are directly elected by Nigeria's citizens. So how do they participate in Nigeria? Very simple. They elect both the president and all members of both houses of parliament. Citizens must be 18 to vote. And the only problem in Nigeria is that elections have been afflicted with fraud and unequal voting rights, so citizens cannot always rely on the courts to protect their rights and freedoms. We were just talking about South Africa. After apartheid, South Africa put laws into place that made sure everybody got the right to vote. The other countries like Nigeria haven't quite caught up to that. Also, women are not equally represented, sadly. All right, so we have now covered the governments of Kenya, South Africa, and Nigeria. We are going to move up into the last piece of our lesson. We are going to do a reflective writing. I know, I can hear the groans, but writing is an extremely important part of expressing how you learn something, or how you view something that you learned. You will need your notes that you just finished taking, and your final sheet of paper. All right, here are my directions. Please answer the writing prompt below with a paragraph. A paragraph is usually 5 to 8 sentences if you're a middle schooler, and using races. I know, what is races? We'll go over that in just a moment. Races, if you'll go to look at the bottom of the screen, means restate the question. That means take the question from the writing prompt and put it into your own words. Answer the questions. That means using things that you read about in your notes or that you see in your notes, answer what the question is asking you. Like if it's asking about citizen participation, you could say something like, all members of Kenya, South Africa, and Nigeria are able to vote at 18. However, not all of them have the same protected rights. Moving further down, cite your evidence. Citing evidence is extremely important in history. When you cite your evidence, you're backing up your statements. You're not just making a random statement. You're giving me proof. Proof is important. So I want you to cite at least 2 facts, so at least 2 things that you learned about this subject is what you are putting in to the citation. Explain your answer. So even if you did an amazing job and you can say, according to my notes, the citizens of South Africa are allowed to vote at 18, you have to be able to come back and explain why that's important to the question. Finally is the S, which is sum up all of your ideas. Don't leave me hanging. Put in a concluding sentence. They're important. All right, so that is our goal. Those are our objectives of how I would like you to do it. And the writing prompt is, please compare and contrast the types of government and citizen participation in Kenya, South Africa, and Nigeria. Thank you so much. One moment, sorry. I got a little ahead of myself. I was going to say, please, if you are not done with this, please feel free to pause. So you have plenty of time to write down that question on your last sheet of paper so that you can work on answering it. And if you need the notes for races, write those down as well. Thank you so much for taking the time to learn today with me about African government, and especially the government citizen participation in Kenya, South Africa, and Nigeria. I hope you enjoyed the lesson.